She went to her best friend's bachelorette party expecting cheap cocktails, embarrassing games, and one last harmless night out, but what she didn't expect was the man who walked through that door, grabbed her face, and kissed her like he'd been waiting years to do it, right in front of everyone. And if you think this is just another party story, stay with me, because what happens next changes lives, destroys secrets, and exposes a truth no one was ready for. Before we begin, hit subscribe, because stories like this don't just entertain, they stay with you, and you won't want to miss how this one ends. Safe. The night was supposed to be harmless, controlled chaos, the kind you could laugh about the next morning with a headache and blurry photos you promised never to post, and as she stepped into the rented loft glowing pink and gold with fairy lights, balloons shaped like rings, and the aggressive bass of early 2000s pop, she told herself she deserved this, deserved to forget for one night the quiet pressure she carried everywhere, the unspoken expectations, the life that always felt like it was happening slightly ahead of her reach. Her name was Clara, and she was the reliable one, the friend who always arrived on time, who remembered birthdays, who never made scenes, which was why nobody noticed how tightly she held her clutch when the shots came out or how she scanned the room like someone checking exits rather than people. This was Lena's bachelorette party. Lena, loud, fearless, getting married in 6 weeks to a man who worshipped her openly, and Clara loved her, truly, but standing there among the laughter and glittering sashes, Clara felt like an extra in someone else's milestone, a woman frozen at 29 while everyone else seemed to be moving forward in bold permanent ink. The games started, questions shouted over music, dares handed out like candy, and Clara played along, smiling when expected, laughing at the right moments, ignoring the subtle ache that came from watching Lena practice being chosen so easily, because what nobody there knew, not even Lena, was that Clara had stopped believing in surprises that ended well. She had learned that lesson years ago, from a man who promised stability and delivered absence, from a job that praised her reliability while quietly replacing her ambition, from nights that ended with her alone in taxis scrolling through photos of lives that looked louder than her own. When the stripper rumor started, someone whispering someone else's cousin knew a guy, Clara felt her shoulders tense, not out of jealousy or judgment but instinct, like something old and buried had just twitched. She went to the bar area to refill her drink when the door buzzed, the music dipped for a moment, and laughter paused just long enough for curiosity to bloom, and that was when he walked in, tall, familiar in a way that made her stomach drop before her brain caught up, his jacket half-zipped, eyes already locked onto her like the room had narrowed to a single point. She didn't have time to say his name, didn't have time to step back, didn't have time to prepare for the shock of recognition, because he crossed the room in 3 strides, cupped her face with hands that remembered her better than she remembered herself, and kissed her, deep, unapologetic, certain, while the room erupted into screams and applause that drowned out the sound of Clara's heart slamming against her ribs. It lasted only seconds, but in those seconds the world fractured, because this wasn't a stranger, and it wasn't a joke, and it definitely wasn't harmless. It was Ethan, the man she had loved once, the man who vanished without explanation 3 years ago, the man whose silence had rewritten her understanding of closure, and as he pulled back, eyes dark with something that looked dangerously close to relief, he said the words that cracked the night wide open, "I told you I'd find you." The party didn't stop immediately, not the way it should have, because people love spectacle more than context, and Clara stood frozen as someone shouted that the surprise stripper had arrived early and Lena laughed too hard, but the laughter sounded thin to Clara now, like glass stretched to breaking. Ethan leaned close, his voice low enough that only she could hear, asking if they could talk, saying he knew this wasn't the right place but there was never a right place, was there, and Clara's mind raced through 1,000 questions that stacked on top of each other until they blurred into one sharp demand: why now? She followed him onto the balcony because staying inside felt like suffocating, and the cold air hit her face hard enough to clear the alcohol fog as the city stretched below them, indifferent and glowing. Ethan didn't apologize the way she expected. Instead, he looked terrified, like a man who had rehearsed this moment and still gotten it wrong, and he told her that disappearing hadn't been a choice, not really, that the night he stopped answering her calls was the same night his life split in half, the night his brother overdosed in a car he had borrowed, the night Ethan became responsible for a 4-year-old niece no one else wanted, the night the future he planned with Clara became something he believed he no longer deserved. Clara listened, anger warring with something softer, something dangerous, because grief explained silence but didn't excuse it, and she told him that she had spent months rewriting herself to survive his absence, months convincing herself that people who leave without explanation don't get to come back unannounced and rewrite the ending. Ethan told her he hadn't come to rewrite anything, only to tell her the truth before she heard it somewhere else, because Lena's fiancé, Mark wasn't just a coincidence, wasn't just a nice guy with a stable job and charming smile. Mark was Ethan's former business partner, the man who took the company Ethan built while Ethan was drowning in responsibility, the man who knew exactly who Clara was and chose not to tell her. The realization hit Clara slowly, like ice spreading through water, because suddenly the room behind her made sense, the too perfect alignment of lives, the way Lena had mentioned Mark once asking odd questions about Clara's past, the way some secrets don't announce themselves until they're already rearranging everything. Before Clara could respond, the balcony door opened and Lena stepped out, her expression shifting from confusion to something sharper as she looked between them, and in that moment Clara understood that whatever version of the night she had planned was gone, replaced by something that could not be laughed off or edited later. Words spilled, accusations tangled, Ethan explained himself badly, Mark was called, voices rose, and the party dissolved into factions of disbelief and loyalty as the truth unfolded in jagged pieces, including the final twist that Clara never expected, that Mark had known Ethan was coming tonight, had invited him under the guise of closure, believing Clara would choose safety over history, believing he could control the narrative if it happened publicly. That was the moment Clara stopped being passive in her own story, the moment she realized this wasn't about men or mistakes but about who got to decide her future, and she made a choice that shocked everyone watching. She walked back inside, took the microphone from a stunned party planner, and told the room exactly what had happened, because secrets lose power when dragged into light, and she refused to carry anyone else's lies another second longer. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves that reshaped everything, starting with Lena calling off the wedding not dramatically but decisively, realizing that trust once cracked never returns to its original shape, followed by Mark leaving the city quietly, his carefully curated life collapsing under scrutiny, and Ethan stepping back instead of forward, telling Clara that choosing herself mattered more than choosing him, that love without agency was just another trap. Clara didn't forgive quickly, didn't leap into romance or grand gestures, instead, she did something braver. She rebuilt, piece by piece, with honesty instead of hope as her foundation. Months passed, seasons changed, and Clara found herself in a different kind of loft one evening, smaller, quieter, hosting her own gathering not to celebrate someone else's milestone but her own, surrounded by people who had seen her choose truth over comfort. Ethan wasn't there, not yet, but when the door buzzed later than expected, Clara smiled before she even opened it, because this time the surprise didn't steal her breath, it met her at eye level, steady and earned. What happened after that kiss at the Bachelorette party wasn't a fairy tale reunion or a clean ending, it was something better, something real, a story where the woman at the center stopped waiting for permission to exist loudly. And if you've ever felt like life was happening just outside your reach, remember this: sometimes the moment that looks like chaos is actually the door finally opening.